had they made it crystal clear, for example, in the promotion of the books, that none of the money was going to the charity, then at least people purchasing the books would have known that.
The Charity Commission has ruled that Captain Tom's family repeatedly benefited personally from the foundation they set up in his honour. Captain Tom Moore gained national acclaim after raising almost £39 million for the NHS Together charities during the pandemic. But in a report out today, marking the close of a 3-year-long inquiry, the regulator concludes that the Ingram Moores damaged public trust in charities by refusing to donate any of the £1.4 million they received from his book deal. Let's turn now to Liz Bransell, who's head of charities and a partner at Burkle's law firm. Liz, welcome.
Hi.
Would you say the Charity Commission's ruling on this is fair then?
Yes, I think the report's incredibly thorough and very detailed, and there's an awful lot of evidence set out. It's 30 pages long, and based on the evidence the Commission has set out in the statutory inquiry report, I can completely understand why they made the decision to disqualify Hannah and Colin Ingram Moore. And I do think that the ruling of mismanagement in the administration of the charity is fair.
And look, we heard part of the Ingram Moore's defence there from Hannah Ingram Moore. How black and white is the handling of charitable funds? I mean, is disqualification of the two as trustees an apt penalty for this sort of thing?
Yes, and it's not always the penalty. It's reserved for more serious cases of mismanagement. People do get things wrong. Charity law can be a complex topic, and the Commission recognises that people can make innocent mistakes that result in losses or damage to a charity's reputation. And sometimes the Commission will make a finding of mismanagement without a disqualification. In fact, that's more common, much more common than disqualification. But in this case, the difficulty that arose is that there was a real blurring of the boundaries, not once, but multiple times, between activity that was designed to make money for the family and activity that was about making money for the charity. And whilst Hannah Ingram Moore is right that they have a right to live, and there is nothing in law that says that Captain Sir Tom Moore had to give all of his intellectual property to the charity, what they did wrong is not being clear and upfront about that. Had they made it crystal clear, for example, in the promotion of the books, that none of the money was going to the charity, then at least people purchasing the books would have known that. And the criticisms are levelled really at the misinformation and the way in which the public were misled through the marketing tactics that were used.
And do you think we should conclude that the family were out of their depth in doing this, or should we think that actually they really knew what they were doing? There was intention to mislead here.
It's very difficult to say. We obviously only have one side of the story. We have the Commission's very independent and impartial report, to be fair, but that is all we have. We haven't seen all of the evidence upon which the findings were based. But it is difficult to see how somebody with her expertise and experience in marketing and PR wouldn't have known or realized that putting out PR statements promoting the books as being published in support of the foundation would have led the public to conclude that monies from those sales would end up supporting the charity. It's quite difficult to see how you could overlook that as somebody who's intelligent and very experienced in marketing.
And what precedent might this set then for the handling of charities in the future?
I don't think it will set a particular precedent. This is not new. The Charity Commission engages in statutory inquiries within charities whenever there are findings of wrongdoing or bad behaviour or poor governance, and the regulatory response is in line with what we see in other statutory inquiries and action and regulatory action by the Commission. So I don't think it's necessarily going to set a precedent. The law has been applied as it should be by the Commission in this case. What we might see is a lot more attention and media interest in the regulatory activity of the Commission as a result.
Thank you very much indeed. Liz Bransell is head of charities and a partner at Burkle's law firm.
So David, the headline here seems to be that Captain Tom's daughter Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband Colin repeatedly benefited from the foundation. These people profited from his name. Is that a fair summary of the situation as you guys see it?
Yeah, so as our investigation found and the report sets out, we found a pattern of behaviour where the Ingram Moores personally benefited from their association with the charity and that those conflicts of interest were not managed.
And what does that mean? Does that mean that they took money that could have gone to charitable causes?
So if you have a look at the report, there are several instances. So for example, there was a book deal that was signed. Now, because of the marketing around that book deal, and indeed Captain Tom's own words in the foreword that it would benefit the charity, the public would rightly have expected some of that money to have gone to the charity. In fact, the £1.4 million was paid directly to the Ingram Moors.
And is that a failure of the charity or a failure of the marketing of the book? How much is that the charity's responsibility to control that?
So it's really important for us that the public have trust and confidence when they're donating. And our view is, having looked at the marketing material, having looked at the words of Captain Tom in the foreword, the public could have expected at least some of those funds to have gone to the charity, and they didn't.
And you'd expect the people running the charity to make sure that the public were not being misled. One of the functions of running a charity is to be transparent with people, so people feel that their money is going to the right place. That is on them.
It's really important that trustees are really clear when use of the charity name, when they are entering into agreements, that they are really clear and that they are transparent with the public about what is going to the charity. And if anything is going to benefit anyone privately, that is really clear and upfront to the public.
And the role of Mr. and Mrs. Ingram Moore, who the charity was launched in May 2020, the role of them in this, do you think, was not clear? Is it the case that, from what you could tell, some of the money in the charity were benefiting them and their family personally?
So as we said in the report, there's a pattern of behaviour. So right at the outset, Mrs. Ingram Moore insisted on the removal of a conflict of interest clause from her contract. Then you've got, in terms of an award ceremony, where there was a payment to Mrs. Ingram Moore of £18,000 and a donation to the charity of only £2,000. The trustees were not aware of that payment, and if they had have been, they could have perhaps negotiated a better deal on the charity's behalf.
Yeah, there's another example which I think many listeners will be familiar with because this entered the news agenda. There was a planning application for a building on the Ingram Moors private land for a spa pool, and that got associated with the charity when it shouldn't have done. And you looked at that, didn't you?
Yes, we did. So whilst we found that no charitable funds were used in the building of that building and spa, what we did find was that the charity's name was used as part of the planning application, inappropriately so.
Captain Moore was around, Tom Moore was around for some of this period. Is there any evidence of how much was being done in his name? I think people want to know. He died in February 2021. The charity was set up in May 2020. I think, for example, the money that went for the judging was going to go to him, and his daughter stepped in for him. Is there any evidence of how much he knew what was going on in his name, in the name of his charity?
So I think what we know is Captain Tom inspired a nation, and we all remember during the pandemic him doing those laps, and the £39 million he raised for NHS charities. All of that money went to those charities, and it enabled them to do incredible work. But sadly, the charity that was set up in his name didn't follow his example of service, duty, and others before self.
You say that in the report. Is that because you think that these family members saw an opportunity? He was so popular, he'd raised up so much money for charity. The charity that was then set up in his name was at least of benefit to them in a way that the thing he did for the NHS charities was not. There was at least, I suppose we could say, a dual purpose to this. The charity was going to raise money for good causes, but it was also going to benefit them materially.
So what we can say, and what we do say in the report, is that there was clear evidence of personal benefit to the Ingram Moors, and that there was a lack of management around the conflict of interest between how they benefited personally and how the charity benefited.
And are the rules strict enough in this area, do you think?
The rules are really clear, and as part of the registration process, we did provide advice to the Ingram Moors on this topic, which is why we have disqualified them for 10 and 8 years respectively. That's a power that is a significant power for us as a regulator, and we've only used it 140 times since we were given those powers by Parliament. So it shows you the seriousness and the level of significance we attach to this behaviour.
But is that punishment enough? People will be saying that this is a guy who was rightly lionized by a nation at a very traumatic period. His name has been used for charitable purposes. You're saying those charitable purposes have not been entirely served. And the punishment, they're no longer charity trustees anyway, and their punishment, they can't do this again in future. I wonder whether people would say, should they pay back some of the money that's been given to them? Should there be a punishment other than simply not being allowed to do it again?
So the disqualification is a really significant and serious power. We can only exercise as a regulator the powers that Parliament grants us. But as we say in the report, we repeatedly during our investigation did call on the Ingram Moors to make a donation and to honour the commitment that Sir Tom, in his own words, put in the foreword of the book. And we called on them to make a donation to the charity and honour that commitment. They refused to do so.
So they have not. So the money that they take, for example, the book money that they've taken, that they've never given that back.
No, so that 1.4 million as part of the book deal, none of that went to the charity. And we've repeatedly called on the Ingram Moors to make a donation to charity and make good on that commitment.
Could you refer this to the police? I mean, is this a matter? I mean, we talk about this a lot on our program. We don't want to always be calling the police on everything that is morally wrong. Doesn't mean it's necessarily legally wrong. That being said, people have in their minds the idea of falsely selling things or selling things under false pretenses, fraudulent behaviour even. Is this a matter that you could refer onwards?
Where we do find criminal behaviour, we do refer on to the police. In this instance, we haven't found that this passes the criminal test. However, as we make clear in the report, our belief is the public have been misled, and that's why we've taken the action we have.
And I mean, you might not want to answer this, and I get the sense that you want to stick to the report, which is exactly professional. I understand that. But I also get the feeling you think they should be ashamed of themselves. You've asked them to return the money. You've said they've not embodied the legacy of this figure, Captain Tom, of others before self. Is it right to say that this couple should be ashamed of what they've done?
We're a proportionate law-based regulator, and as the report sets out, we've found clear failings on behalf of the Ingram Moors in this charity and the other trustees. I think the public can make their own mind up based on the evidence contained within the report.
And I think people listening to this will make their own mind up indeed. And you've been very clear, David, on what has and hasn't happened. So thank you very much for your time.